Uncle Doug?
Uncle Dan.
Here's the thing. Usually, when the How To Heretic decides to crack open the pages of the good book, the bad book, as I like to call it, it's you or me talking about it.
That's true. That's kind of our specialty. Speciality.
Yeah. But somebody else an interloper is amongst us. Someone is treading on our turf.
I decided to take a whack at it. And, one of the last times I did, for some reason, because there's a gas leak in my house, I decided to do the entire book of Ezekiel. Yeah. So this time I picked one that's a little shorter, a story that's a little bit shorter, and a little, well, the morality is certainly clear to me. I'll see if you guys agree with it. So let's dive in.
Well, I mean, if there's one thing about that book, it's that the morality is usually unassailable.
Completely, and that's why it's in every hotel room in America. So, none of us have children, guys, and please don't anybody say that I know of. I don't know how parents feel about their offspring deep in their hearts, but speaking for myself, I've never wanted to kill one, and since I'm not sure if that's even socially acceptable or legal, I'm going to err on the side of not killing a child just to be safe. But for seriouses, here in 2020, we have advanced to a point, I hope, where we can almost, at least of this recording, I haven't looked at his tweets for the last 5 minutes, agree that killing children is a bad thing and should be done with as little frequency and as much care as possible. Like us, they must be allowed to emerge from the beautiful dream and fun and discovery that is childhood into the cold, harsh light of adulthood and discover one thing at a time that everything sucks all for themselves. We'll talk about attitudes about killing children and how they may or may not have evolved over time in a second, but I want to mention what set my wheels grinding on this broader topic, oddly enough. Because everything isn't horrible enough. I spend way more time than I should on Twitter. I know, fuck my life. The other day I observed a conversation wherein a faithful Mormon was loudly proclaiming numerous health-restoring miracles that his priesthood power and his faith in the gospel had manifested in his life. A somewhat skeptical Twitterer asked him politely to expound on these modern-day miracles. He instantly shot back that he does not cast his pearls before swine. And that just kind of struck me. So we'll come back to that. So where were we? Oh, yes, killing children. Ask your doctor when child murder might be right for you. And if you don't have insurance, you can ask your priest or your bishop or even your rabbi about it. Now, how is that even a thing, Uncle Mark? You maybe or maybe not are asking. Well, Nibblings, that is because buried in the big book of genocide, slavery, and more than a few instances of infanticide, there is a brief and terrible story that is, and I cannot stress this enough, even if I screamed it, inexplicably one of the central pillars of Judeo-Christian, quote, morality, and that is the story of Abraham and Isaac.
Correct.
Yay!
So Abraham was this guy who, although no proof that he even existed outside of the Bible exists, is super important to your Jews, your Muslims, and every single flavor of Christianity.
Yeah.
And as Doug will prove later, very problematically to Mormons. So he was getting really old and wanted a son, with his actual wife, Sarah, apparently not being satisfied with the son Ishmael he had conceived with his slave Hagar. Quick note, he, Abraham, the good guy in this story, throws Ishmael and Hagar out, abandoning them to die in the desert. This will dovetail nicely with the overall theme of my segment today. So why waste time? It's a short story. Let me just read it to y'all from the new international version of the Bible. Sorry, Doug. Because it fleshes out the narrative a bit more than the KJV, sorry, not the KGB. Their version of the story is entirely different. The KJV, saving my lazy ass some oxygen. Here it is in Genesis 22, 1 through 19. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, it's just one word, Abraham. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, FYI, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Early the next morning, Abraham got up, loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants, that means slaves, and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey, while I and the boy go over there." Why is that important? "We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. That's equitable. As the two of them went together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand.
Can I just, sorry, there seems to be just one little, and then he bound his son. There was no "come here, you!"
No, none at all. So then he reached out his hand.
Well, it does seem like, it seems like Isaac might have been a bit of a credulous kid.
Yeah.
Just, "Hey, what are you doing now, Dad? You're tying me up? Okay.
Oh, should I lay on the wood?
You want me to
great.
lay down on this thing?
Hey, Dad, it's getting real hot.
What's the knife for?"
So then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham!" "Here I am," he replied. The dialogue is super weird. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." No, he has another son named Ishmael, but whatever. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided."
I love the fact that a really important part of this story is you got to kill something.
Yeah, exactly.
You already built the altar.
So the angel, it's like, maybe that's what being left at the altar comes from, right? You can't leave me at the altar. So the angel of the Lord.
I also like the idea that they found literally the dumbest sheep that has ever existed.
How did it get tangled
There's
up?
a sheep just tangled in a bush.
Yeah. Let's kill that. So the angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, "I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this," and is that the first time God swears to himself? Like on a Bible? "I swear to me, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and you have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand of the seashores. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me." Then Abraham returned to his servants, and they set off together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. Okay, superstition aside.
When is this all of the nations will be blessed part going to happen? When does that happen?
Any day now.
Soon. So here's what happens in this fucking story. A man who has recently evicted his lover and young son into the desert with one bottle of water to die of thirst and exposure hears a voice that is not his tell him to slice the throat of and burn the warm body of his 37-year-old son. He asks no questions, makes no plea, just gets the fuck up the next day, tells Isaac and a couple of slaves to get the donkey, they're going on a hike. He chops the amount of wood he reckons it will take to reduce his beloved son's body to ash, and off they go. When they get to the mountain, he tells the slaves to stay with the donkey and they'll be right back. He expresses more concern for the well-being of the donkey in the story than for his own son. Then he essentially lies to Isaac, makes him carry the wood for his own fucking funeral pyre up the mountain himself, lies to him again when he asks where the lamb is, then ties his own child up and prepares without hesitation to cut his throat and let him bleed out, all kosher-like. I wonder if the bottle of water Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael off to die with was actually his slightly chipped world's greatest dad mug. Anyway, then in the nick of time, the voice tells him to stop, so he does. They see a ram in the weeds and kill him instead. Huzzah! Much morals, so hero. Let's make this story the cornerstone of our morality forever and ever, you guys.
Yeah.
Let us teach this story to our children to let them know that if a voice tells us to, we'll cut their fucking throats and burn their bodies on a mountainside. I mean, what the actual fuck with this bullshit? A man... Go ahead.
Can I just say, I love the idea that the actual only possible good moral that could come from this is, but he didn't kill him.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, that's as good as it gets, and it's still shitty.
And he gets credit for it, like, the most credit. Who gets
Yeah.
more credit than Abraham for anything? So anyway, a man that abandoned a woman and a child to die already nearly kills his adult son after lying to him and making him carry the wood for his own cremation is the good guy in this story, and indeed one of the definitive good guys to billions of people worldwide.
yeah.
Now,
Go
ahead.
I was saying he might be the most revered man in the world,
Other than maybe
given-
Jesus or Muhammad,
but
right?
like, right. I mean, but Muhammad, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all revere
yes, Abraham.
Abraham more so than in a lot of cases they do Moses, because Abraham is the father of all three of these religions.
Yeah,
Right.
It's insane. So now apologists have dressed this up more than a fucking Christmas tree with reasons and excuses that are simply not there. You see, they say, this was to shock the Israelites out of ever participating in child sacrifice again. That's bullshit. Abraham was down to clown with infanticide. Didn't even pause.
Yeah, totally.
Didn't even pause. Oh, no, you see, they say. This was this is crazy. This was a foreshadowing of the life and tribulations of Jesus.
Of course.
Yeah. Oh, shut up. It's not. The authors of Genesis and the authors of the Gospels lived 1,000 years apart. It's absurd. You see, they say, this is a test of faith. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, great job, Abraham, for passing this horrible test with flying colors. But
Right.
you failed the tests of basic humanity and fatherhood, like, really badly. And
Yeah, like any other moral teacher would be like, no, you failed.
yes, the
test."
trolley problem, you fucked this completely up.
Right.
And my favorite apologetic, Abraham had to learn about temptation and how to avoid it.
What?
A temptation is offering somebody something they really, really want in order to corrupt them. So
Yeah.
this obviously
Really?
means that for 37 years, Abraham really wanted to kill the shit out of Isaac. And he just needed a random voice to loose his dagger. Temptation. Fuck off with that. So every inch of this story is terrifyingly cruel. There is nothing redeeming or useful about it. Even the minor characters are slaves. But
Right.
But here we are with the majority of the people who surround us, all on a daily basis, thinking this is wonderful. We've explored around 50 biblical stories or parables here on The Heretic, mining for meaning and morality, and coming up with an empty bucket. Whether it's Job, the Good Shepherd, David and Bathsheba, the Ark of the Covenant, Elisha and the Bears, one single word of Leviticus, Philemon, Ezekiel, or Exodus, or Revelation, it's all horrible, and almost without exception, the moral of the narrative is the direct opposite of the moral we were taught they contain by people
Right.
who were either lying to us or perpetuating older lies unaware. There are not an insignificant number of conversations in the Bible between slaves and people who own them. In Dan's story a couple weeks ago about David's terrible kids, Amnon and Absalom, one of them rapes his sister and the other one tells her to fuck off about it. That's it. That's the whole moral.
Yup.
And sure, there's the golden rule and the Sermon on the Mount, but for every one of those gems, there's 100 slayings of Canaanites and the latest crimes of King David. Everybody loves to talk about what a sweet dude Jesus was, but they may be forgetting Luke 19:27, where he said, "But those mine enemies, which would not that I should reign over them, bring them hither and slay them before me." Or how about his call to abandon everybody in Luke 14:26, which is a real charmer? "If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple." Or this Christ-like tidbit of love in Matthew 5:29. "If thy right eye offendeth thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell." And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell.
That kind of sucks because if I cut off my right hand, I'm right-handed. I'm not going to throw it very well.
It's
when I
not good
throw it
advice,
away,
guys.
It's going to look like I throw bad with my left.
And then you're going to get an infection, and who wants that?
Yeah.
And here's history's most beloved peacenik in Matthew 10:34. Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I come not to send peace, but a sword. And then there's the time he killed the fig tree or made the non-believer lady beg him, then convert before he'd exorcise her kid's demons, blah, blah, blah. He's a classic cult leader, kind of charismatic, but extremely self-absorbed. Hey, this is all about me over here. Okay. And a little about my dad, but mostly about me. So aside from murder and slavery and hatred of women and disgust with the sick and disabled and fear of birds and touching weasels, there's something that every page of the Bible has in common with every other one. And that is callousness. Every conversation, every interaction is stunningly cruel, cold, and abusive. People are bought and sold and fucked and discarded without thought or explanation. Children are abandoned or forgotten. There is less than 0% of the concept of consent. Life seems essentially meaningless and worthless in its pages because it's a reflection of the horrendous times it was written in and the awful people who wrote it. And that brings me back to the pearls before swine comment, taken from the oh-so-holy Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is basically saying not to waste one's time with the unconvincible. Okay, fine. But in that online exchange I mentioned earlier, a man claiming direct contact with the power of the divine casually called a woman asking a polite question a swine.
Yeah.
I'm sure he went to bed that night feeling fine because it was, quote, from the Bible, but it's awful. What a horrible thing to call a person for just asking a question.
Right.
If you see some huge, screamy political or moral fight on social media, go to the most aggressive, hateful participant's bio and take a peek. After the American flags, you will almost universally find some combination of Christian, pastor, father, patriot, Jesus, faith, etc., right?
Yeah.
Could it be that the insane, verbally and emotionally violent and callous language and behavior we see every day in American Christians comes from the book that they model their entire lives off of? Are we seeing ghastly Bronze Age mores turbocharged by modern technology? The Bible is absolutely dripping with violence, cruelty, emotional malfunction, and hatred. Can we be surprised if the people who declare it the guiding force in their lives may often drip with violence, cruelty, and emotional dysfunction? The morals of the stories are all bad and damaging, but so is everything in between. It's 1,000 pages of inverted moral fables supported by endless passages of a completely dismal, unenlightened worldview based on the valuelessness of human life. So how can we expect people to think who think that it's God's inspired word to behave in a more enlightened, pluralistic, and less callous way? So that's what kind of struck me, is just how callous Christians behave towards other people, just generally. Yeah. So I think Abraham and Isaac is an excellent vehicle for that conversation.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right, particularly in this case, because it's a foundational myth.
Yeah.
And anything that is any hesitation or regret in the mind of Abraham or fear or psychological damage in the mind of Isaac ain't in the text.
It doesn't even rate mentioning.
No.
Right?
Right.
And so the apologists try to say, well, Abraham prayed and he pled about. No, it doesn't say that anywhere.
He didn't hesitate.
He didn't fucking hesitate. And that's why he's a righteous man.
Well, that's the thing, is that the Bible, in order to extract the good holy messages from it, requires revision.
Yeah.
Like you have to add to and or subtract from and or expurgate in order to get anything good out of it.
Yeah, you have to
or you
invent
have
the moral.
you have to be some PhD in Hebrew language to be able to say, actually, this word meant that word. It's like, all I've got is what's written in front of me.
Right.
Right.
I don't have time to study ancient Hebrew and read all the other texts that have something to... This is all I got.
Your standard issue American Christian is not going to go get a degree in the classics. Right.
Also, the guys that have the degree in the classics, the guys that can read all of the Greek, the Aramaic, the Hebrew, those guys have gone through it. And guess what? Their explanations are 0% more satisfying than just reading it.
Yep.
It's just confusion, and, when you actually, slog through all of the different, this is a misinterpretation of this word, and this word actually probably meant this and that and the other. Okay, it's still a shitty story.
Yeah, and it just pushes it closer to total narrative meaninglessness.
Right.
Right. If you need, if the inerrant word of God needs the support of 35 PhDs and thousands of pages of explanatory materials,
then it's flawed.
it might be flawed.
Yeah.
It might be aired.
Did either of you guys ever read the book by Chris Matheson, The Story of God?
I listened to it on audio.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. If anyone hasn't done it, it's well worth your time. He basically just takes the character of God as he is introduced and does or says things throughout the Bible, and gives those sets of pronouncements and actions a character.
Yeah.
And it's not a good one, obviously. And so he takes this story of Isaac and Abraham and Isaac, and he's not the first one to do this, but he does it quite well, that God didn't think Abraham would do it. And he was so shocked and disgusted that he would, because in the story, an angel comes and stops him, not God.
Yeah.
And then God is out of the narrative for a while. And so Chris Matheson makes this kind of great story about how God was alarmed and unnerved by what he had created that would do such terrible things without a moment's hesitation.
And the God in his story is an utter asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, look, God needs to learn that he shouldn't get drunk and dare people to do shit if he doesn't want to see it actually
poor
happen.
Job and all his dead family.
Right.
Yeah.
So-
And everybody who lived at the time of the ark.
Yeah. So it's mean. The Bible's mean and it's useless. And so,
But at least it's badly written.
yeah. And as we discussed with Dan a week or two ago, but it's literature. It's such
Yeah, right.
no, it's garbage that way too. So enough.
All right. Thanks.
I'm again it.
I'm again.
For that.
Bye, Isaac. Poor fucker.
Don't kill your kids.
Please.
Moving
Don't
on.
kill your kids.